The gasp was a theatrical masterpiece. It sliced through the hushed, expectant air of the bridal suite, sharper than the scent of lilies and hairspray. Brenda Vance clutched her chest, her knuckles white against the silk of her mother-of-the-bride dress. "My heart," she whispered, her voice a fragile, cracking thing. "Aaliyah, baby. I don't think I can make it." Her eyes, wide and panicked, fixed on me, David Coleman, the 38-year-old black man who was minutes away from marrying her daughter. She called me a freelancer, a drifter with a laptop, a man with no future. What she didn't know was that I not only knew her cardiologist, Dr. Marcus Evans, but I also owned the company that manufactured the very technology keeping him appraised of her supposedly fragile heart. And my phone was in my pocket. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our stories. Drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Are you in Atlanta, Houston, London, or maybe Lagos? I love seeing our global community. Now let's get back to David and see how this unfolds. The bridal suite at the Grand Astoria Hotel was a sea of ivory, gold, and controlled chaos. My fiancée, Aaliyah Vance, was a vision. At 35, she was a stunning black woman with a warm mahogany complexion that seemed to drink in the light. Her thick natural 4C coils had been expertly styled into an elegant updo, woven with delicate pearl pins that shimmered with her every movement. Her full lips, painted a soft rose, were parted in shock as she stared at her mother. She was the reason I had endured the last 2 years. The reason I had bitten my tongue until it bled, smiled through insults that would have made a lesser man walk away, and played the part of the humble, slightly out-of-his-depth partner. Her mother, Brenda Vance, was 62 years old, and ruled her family with an iron will wrapped in designer silk. She was a striking black woman, her rich, dark skin meticulously cared for, a testament to expensive creams and a lifetime of self-importance. Her salt and pepper hair was pulled back into a severe, elegant chignon that allowed no room for frivolity, much like her personality. High cheekbones and a sharp jaw gave her an aristocratic air, an air she used to look down on everyone, but especially on me. She considered me the single greatest mistake of her daughter's life. "Mom, what is it? What's wrong?" Aaliyah rushed to her side, her own beautiful wedding gown, a cascade of lace and satin, rustling around her. Brenda leaned heavily on her, her breath coming in shallow, dramatic pants. "It's the arrhythmia, the stress. It's too much." Her eyes flickered towards me. I stood near the door, a silent observer in my custom-tailored tuxedo. I was a black man of 38, with deep brown skin and a neatly trimmed beard that framed a jawline she once called unrefined. My natural hair was cut in a low, clean fade, and my calm brown eyes, which she mistook for weakness, were taking in every detail of her performance. The slight tremor in her hand that wasn't quite convincing. The way her breathing hitched only when Aaliyah was looking directly at her. The fact that the high-tech cardiac monitor she wore on her wrist, a flagship product from my company, Med Innovate Solutions, was showing a perfectly steady heart rate of 78 beats per minute on the app synced to my phone. Aaliyah's younger brother, Jamal Vance, stepped forward. He was 30, a younger male version of Brenda in many ways. He had his mother's dark complexion and high cheekbones, his hair in meticulously sculpted waves. He worked in finance, a fact Brenda never tired of announcing, and saw me as a rival for his sister's attention, and more importantly, a drain on the family's perceived status. "See, Aaliyah, I told you this was too much for her," he said, his voice laced with a triumphant sort of concern. "This whole thing, it's been stressful for everyone." The whole thing was my relationship with Aaliyah. From the moment I was introduced, Brenda had made her disapproval clear. The first major incident was at our engagement party, 6 months ago. It was held at her home, a sprawling, ostentatiously decorated house in the suburbs she'd bought during her peak years as a real estate agent. She'd cornered me by the grand piano, a glass of champagne in her hand. "David," she'd begun, her voice like honey laced with arsenic. "I must admit, I'm still struggling to understand what it is you do." "I'm a freelance tech consultant, Brenda," I had replied calmly, using the vague, unassuming title I'd adopted for the sake of privacy. It was true in a way. I consulted, on a global scale, with hospital networks and research institutions. She'd laughed, a tinkling sound that didn't reach her eyes. "A consultant? It sounds so transient. Aaliyah is used to a certain standard of living. My late husband, God rest his soul, was a partner at his law firm. Jamal is a vice president at his bank. We are people of substance." She gestured around the room at her collection of art and antiques. "Substance requires stability, a real job, a 401k, not gigs." I had just nodded. We manage," she repeated, tasting the words with disgust. "My daughter deserves more than to just manage. She deserves to be provided for, not to be supporting a man's hobby." At that moment, Aaliyah had walked over, sensing the tension. "Mom, are you grilling David again?" she'd asked, trying to keep her tone light. Her hand found mine, her touch a silent apology. Brenda had smiled sweetly at her daughter. "Of course not, darling. I'm just getting to know my future son-in-law, making sure he understands what it means to be a part of this family." The unspoken addendum hung in the air, and that he'll never measure up. The humiliation didn't stop there. It escalated. At every family dinner, every holiday, Brenda and Jamal would form a united front of passive aggression. They'd ask pointed questions about my income. They'd tell stories of Aaliyah's ex-boyfriends, a doctor and a lawyer, and sigh dramatically about what could have been. They'd offer me career advice, suggesting I look into getting a real estate license or a job in banking under Jamal. Each suggestion was a perfectly crafted insult, designed to chip away at my worth in Aaliyah's eyes. My love, Aaliyah, was trapped. She was a deeply loyal daughter, conditioned from birth to seek her mother's approval. She would defend me weakly. "Mom, please. David is very successful at what he does." But her defenses only seemed to fuel Brenda's fire. After every encounter, she would apologize profusely in private. "I'm so sorry, baby. She doesn't mean it. She's just protective." "I know," I would say, holding her close. But we both knew it was more than that. It was about control. Brenda Vance could not control me, so she had to destroy me in the eyes of the one person who mattered. The worst incident had been 3 months ago. During a family meeting, Brenda had called specifically to discuss our wedding plans. We were all gathered in her formal living room. Her husband, Robert Vance Sr., had passed away 5 years prior, but his stern portrait hung over the mantelpiece, a constant judging presence. Brenda's sister, Aunt Carol, was also there. Carol was 58, a quiet, observant black woman with warm brown skin and short, natural gray coils. She rarely spoke, but her eyes saw everything. Brenda had a binder open on her lap, filled with spreadsheets and budgets. "Now, about the finances," she'd announced, peering at us over her reading glasses. "Aaliyah, darling, your father and I set aside a wedding fund for you. It's substantial, but it's meant for a wedding that reflects this family's standing." She'd looked directly at me. "Frankly, David, I don't see any contribution from your side. I assume you expect us to foot the entire bill." Before I could speak, Jamal had chimed in. "It's fine, Mom. We all know David's situation is precarious. We can't expect him to contribute in any meaningful way. He's basically a charity case in this scenario." The phrase charity case hung in the air, thick and poisonous. I saw Aaliyah flinch. Her knuckles were white as she gripped the arm of her chair. I remained perfectly still, my expression unreadable. Inside, a cold, precise anger was solidifying. It wasn't the hot, reckless anger of a wounded ego, but the patient, calculated anger of a strategist. I let the insult land. I let them all see me absorb it. I was under the impression, I said, my voice even, that the wedding was about Aaliyah and me starting our life together, not a financial transaction. Brenda had snapped the binder shut. Don't be naive, David. Everything is a transaction. A marriage is a merger. And right now, from a business perspective, my daughter is merging with a failing startup. That was the moment I knew I couldn't let it go on. I had been patient for 2 years, wanting Aaliyah to come to her own conclusions, to find the strength to stand up to her mother without my interference. I had kept my true life a secret because I wanted to be loved for who I was, not for what I had. I'd seen what wealth did to people, how it twisted relationships into transactions, just as Brenda had said. I wanted something real. With Aaliyah, I had that. But her family's toxicity was a poison that was slowly seeping into our foundation. I realized I had to protect us, and to do that, I had to stop playing their game. A few days after that meeting, my phone buzzed. It was a calendar alert. Quarterly Philanthropy Review, St. Jude's Cardiac Wing. I looked at the alert, and a plan began to form. A quiet, methodical, and devastatingly effective plan. I made a few calls. The first was to my CFO. The second was to the hospital's development director. The third, and most important, was to the chief of cardiology, a man I knew very well. Now, back in the bridal suite, the memory of that insult, charity case, echoed in my mind as Brenda Vance put on the performance of a lifetime. Aaliyah was trying to help her onto a chaise lounge, her face a mask of fear and worry. "Someone call 911!" she cried out. Jamal pulled out his phone, his expression a smug mixture of concern for his mother and satisfaction at the chaos. The wedding was about to be derailed. He was getting what he wanted. Brenda was getting what she wanted. "Wait," I said. My voice was calm, but it cut through the panic. Everyone turned to look at me. Aaliyah's eyes were pleading. Jamal's were filled with contempt. Brenda's held a flicker of triumph. "There's no need to call an ambulance just yet," I continued, walking slowly toward them. "It would be better to get a direct opinion from her specialist. Dr. Evans, right?" Brenda's eyes narrowed slightly. "He's the best. He won't be available. You don't just call Dr. Evans." "You're right," I agreed, pulling my phone from my pocket. "You don't just call him." I unlocked the screen and navigated to my contacts. "But when you've funded his entire research wing, and your company provides the diagnostic equipment he builds his reputation on, he tends to pick up." The room went silent. Jamal scoffed. "What are you talking about? You're delusional." Aaliyah just stared at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. "David, what are you doing?" I held up my phone so they could see the screen. The contact name was clear. Dr. Marcus Evans, cell. I pressed the call button and then hit the speakerphone icon. The phone rang once, twice. Then a rich, calm voice filled the suite. "David, I was wondering if you'd be calling. Is everything all right? If you're already seeing where this is going, hit that like button right now. And comment below. What do you think David should do? Should they reveal the truth or keep watching? Let me know your prediction. Now, what happens next changes everything." Brenda Vance's face, which had been a carefully constructed mask of pained fragility, froze. The color drained from her rich, dark skin. She stared at my phone as if it were a snake. Jamal looked utterly bewildered, his mouth slightly agape. Dr. Marcus Evans was the most sought-after cardiologist in the state. At 45, he was a brilliant black man with smooth ebony skin, a neatly trimmed salt and pepper goatee, and an air of unimpeachable authority. I first met him 5 years ago, not as a patient, but as a potential investor. It was 3 years before I met Aaliyah. I was in the final development stages of the Aura cardiac monitor at MedInnovate. It was a revolutionary piece of wearable tech, capable of providing real-time, AI-driven analysis of a patient's heart condition with 99.8% accuracy. To get it to market, I needed a clinical partner, a top-tier institution to run the final trials. I was introduced to Dr. Evans, then the ambitious head of research at St. Jude's Hospital. I remember our first meeting. I walked into the hospital boardroom, dressed in my usual unassuming attire, a simple black sweater and dark jeans. I was 33 at the time, and I looked younger. The board members, a collection of older, stern-faced individuals, looked me over with skepticism. They were expecting the CEO of a company seeking a multi-million-dollar partnership to look different, more ostentatious, more like them. Dr. Evans was the only one who didn't judge me on sight. He was a black man who had navigated the politics of medicine and academia, and he knew that substance didn't always come in a tailored suit. His warm brown eyes were focused and intelligent. He listened intently as I laid out the technology, the data, and my vision. "What you're proposing, Mr. Coleman," he said after my presentation, his voice resonating with intellectual curiosity, "could change the way we practice cardiology. It could save thousands of lives. But the resources required for a trial of this magnitude are immense." "I'm aware," I'd said. "That's why MedInnovate isn't just proposing a partnership. We're proposing an endowment. We're prepared to fund the construction of a new state-of-the-art cardiology research wing. We'll provide the equipment, the staff, and the operating budget for the next 10 years. In return, St. Jude's becomes our exclusive clinical partner for the Aura project." A stunned silence fell over the room. The figure I had quoted was staggering. One of the older board members, a man named Henderson, had cleared his throat. "That's a very generous offer, but for a commitment of that size, we'd need to see proof of funds. Your company is new, privately held. We can't find much on you." I slid a folder across the mahogany table to Dr. Evans. "Those are my company's financials, independently audited, and my personal guarantee." Dr. Evans opened the folder. His professional calm broke for just a fraction of a second. His eyes widened slightly as he scanned the first page. He looked up at me, a new level of respect dawning in his expression. He closed the folder and pushed it back toward me. "I don't think that will be necessary, Mr. Coleman. I believe we have a basis for a very fruitful partnership." That was the beginning of my relationship with Marcus Evans. We became more than partners. We became friends, united by a shared passion for innovation and a desire to make a real impact. The Coleman Cardiology Wing at St. Jude's opened 2 years later. MedInnovate Solutions went on to become a quiet giant in the medical technology industry, with a valuation in the billions. I remained the sole owner, fiercely private, avoiding the spotlight of IPOs and tech magazines. I had my work, my purpose, and I didn't need the world's validation. Then I met Aaliyah, and for the first time, I wanted something more. I wanted a life partner. I deliberately kept my professional life separate. I introduced myself as a consultant. I drove a modest car. I lived in a comfortable but not extravagant condo. I wanted her to fall in love with David Coleman, the man, not David Coleman, the CEO. And she did. But I had underestimated her mother. I never imagined that someone could be so viciously obsessed with status and wealth that she would try to destroy her own daughter's happiness over it. Brenda had become a patient of Dr. Evans about a year ago, on the recommendation of a friend. She loved to name-drop him, boasting that she had the best cardiologist in the city. The irony was almost too much to bear. Her rare condition was a minor, manageable arrhythmia, which she exaggerated for sympathy and control, and the monitor she wore to track it, the one she loved to show off as a symbol of her delicate health, it was my Aura monitor. Every beat of her heart, every flutter was transmitted to a secure server at MedInnovate headquarters, analyzed by an algorithm I had written myself, and compiled into a report for Dr. Evans. I had access to all of it. So, when Brenda had launched her final, desperate gambit on my wedding day, I was ready. "David," Dr. Evans' voice said again from the phone speaker, pulling me back to the tense bridal suite. "I'm here. What can I do for you?" I looked directly at Brenda, whose face was now a pale, frozen mask of disbelief. "Dr. Evans, it's David Coleman. I'm here with my fiancée, Aaliyah, and her mother, Brenda Vance. Mrs. Vance seems to be experiencing a cardiac episode. She feels she's unable to attend the wedding." There was a brief pause on the line. I knew Marcus well. He was processing the information, understanding the subtext immediately. He knew about my wedding day. He and his wife were invited guests, scheduled to arrive for the reception. He also had Brenda's file open on his computer screen at home. I was sure of it. "I see," Dr. Evans said, his voice a smooth, professional balm that belied the surgical strike he was about to deliver. "Mrs. Vance, can you hear me?" Brenda stared at the phone, mute. Aaliyah, kneeling beside her, answered for her. "Yes, doctor. She can hear you. She's clutching her chest. She says it's her arrhythmia." "I understand," Dr. Evans said kindly. "However, I am looking at her real-time data from her aura monitor as we speak. Her heart rate is currently 82 beats per minute, perfectly regular. Her blood pressure, transmitted just 5 minutes ago, is 125/80. Her oxygen saturation is 99%. Vitals-wise, Mrs. Vance is in excellent health. In fact, her numbers are better than mine at the moment." Jamal took a step forward. "But she's in pain. She collapsed." "I'm sure she feels distressed," Dr. Evans continued, his tone unwavering. "But I can assure you, it is not a cardiac event. There have been 0 arrhythmic flutters recorded in the last 72 hours. Her EKG readings are as stable as a textbook diagram. I reviewed her full monthly report this morning in preparation for her checkup next week, and her heart is stronger than it's been in years. There is absolutely no medical reason for her to be experiencing these symptoms, or for her to miss her daughter's wedding." He paused for a beat, letting the words sink in. "Unless, of course, the symptoms are non-cardiac in nature, perhaps related to anxiety or something else." The something else hung in the air, a silent, damning accusation. Brenda Vance, the master manipulator, had been surgically dismantled by unassailable data. Data provided by the charity case she had tried so desperately to expel from her family. Aaliyah slowly stood up. Good. She looked from the phone to her mother's now ashen face, to me. Her eyes, which had been clouded with panic, were clearing with a horrifying, dawning realization. The small moments of her mother's possessiveness, the constant criticisms of me, the manufactured dramas, it was all clicking into place, forming a picture of manipulation so profound it stole her breath. She looked at her mother, truly looked at her, and for the first time, she wasn't seeing a fragile matriarch in need of protection. She was seeing a saboteur. "Mom?" Aaliyah's voice was a whisper, but it was sharp with a new, unfamiliar edge. Were you faking it? We're about to reach the moment you've been waiting for. If this story has you on the edge of your seat, subscribe if you haven't already, and share this with someone who needs to see karma in action. Because what David does next? Brenda never saw it coming. Brenda Vance opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The Queen had been checkmated, her entire strategy exposed in a 3-minute phone call. The feigned weakness, her most potent weapon, was gone. She was left exposed, stripped of her narrative. Her eyes darted around the room, looking for an escape, an ally. She looked at Jamal, but even his smug confidence had evaporated, replaced by a slack-jawed confusion. He was a bully, but he wasn't a strategist. He had no idea how to play this new game. Dr. Evans' voice came through the speaker one last time, calm and decisive. "David, my professional medical advice is that Mrs. Vance is perfectly healthy and cleared to attend all festivities. I'll see you and your beautiful bride at the reception. Congratulations again to you both." Then, with a soft click, he was gone. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument could ever be. I slid my phone back into my pocket. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, my gaze fixed on Aaliyah, giving her the space to process, to feel, to decide. This was her moment of reckoning. The choice she made now would define the rest of our lives. Aaliyah's gaze shifted from her mother's crumbling facade to me. She saw me standing there, not with triumph, but with a quiet, steady strength she was only now beginning to understand. The pieces were connecting in her mind. The strange, specific way I'd talked about medical technology. My quiet confidence that she'd mistaken for passivity. My patience in the face of her mother's cruelty. It wasn't weakness. It was restraint. "You knew," she whispered, her voice filled with awe and a dawning horror. "You knew she was lying." I gave a single slow nod. I did. "And the doctor, Dr. Evans, how do you know him like that?" Jamal finally found his voice, sputtering with disbelief. "Who are you?" This was it, the moment of truth. I had wanted to tell Aaliyah everything after we were married, on our honeymoon, away from the poison of her family. But Brenda had forced my hand. She had made the wedding itself the battlefield, so I had to end the war right here, right now. I turned to my soon-to-be brother-in-law. "You called me a charity case, Jamal. You and your mother have spent 2 years calling me a failure, a drifter, a man with no substance. You judged me because I don't wear flashy suits or brag about my job." I took a small step forward, my voice remaining low and steady, but now it carried the weight of absolute authority. "My name is David Coleman. I am the founder and sole owner of MedInnovate Solutions, a medical technology firm valued at approximately $4.2 billion. The Aura cardiac monitor your mother is wearing? I designed the core software. The research wing at St. Jude's, where Dr. Evans works. It's called the Coleman Wing, because I funded it with a personal donation of $50 million. So, to answer your question, Jamal, I'm the man who has had access to your mother's real-time, unexaggerated medical data for the past year. I am the man who has patiently listened to you call him a burden, while your mother's entire sense of medical security rested on technology created by my company." Every word landed like a physical blow. Jamal staggered back as if I had shoved him. His face, a mirror of his mother's, went from disbelief to shock to a sickly, greenish horror. He understood money. He understood power. And the numbers I had just quoted were beyond his comprehension. He wasn't just in the presence of someone successful. He was in the presence of a level of wealth and influence he could only dream of. The man he had mocked, the man he called a charity case, could buy and sell his bank without a second thought. But my focus was on Aaliyah. Her beautiful face was a kaleidoscope of emotions: shock, confusion, hurt, and finally, a profound, gut-wrenching clarity. The hurt wasn't directed at me. It was for the years of lies she had endured from her own mother, for the way she had been manipulated, for the conflict she'd been put through. She turned to Brenda, who was now slumped on the chaise lounge, no longer feigning a heart attack, but experiencing the genuine collapse of her world. "All this time," Aaliyah said, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and sorrow, "all this time, you've been trying to drive him away. You tried to ruin my wedding day. You lied. You faked a medical emergency to stop me from being happy." "Aaliyah, no, baby. You don't understand," Brenda began, her voice a pathetic whine. The powerful matriarch was gone, replaced by a desperate, pleading woman. "I was just trying to protect you from him. He's been deceiving us all." "He's been deceiving you." Aaliyah's laugh was brittle, humorless. "No, Mom. He's been testing you, and you failed, spectacularly." She looked at me. and her eyes were shining with unshed tears, but also with a fierce, protective love that I had never seen before. It was the look I had been waiting 2 years for. It was the look of a woman who had finally chosen her partner, unequivocally. She walked over to me, not with the hesitant steps of the past, but with the confident stride of a woman who knew her own mind. She took my hands in hers. "Is the wedding still on?" she asked, her voice clear and strong. "It's whatever you want it to be," I said softly, my heart aching with love for her. She squeezed my hands. "I want to marry you, David Coleman, more than ever." She turned back to her mother and brother, who were watching, frozen in their tableau of shock. "The ceremony starts in 10 minutes. You can either be there in the front row, smiling, to witness the best decision I've ever made, or you can leave. But make no mistake, I am walking down that aisle, and I am marrying this man. Your performance is over." With that, she turned her back on them. She looked at her maid of honor, a smart, loyal black woman named Keisha, who had been watching the entire drama unfold with wide eyes. Keisha had smooth caramel skin and her hair in long, beautiful box braids. She had always been quietly supportive of me. Now, a slow, knowing smile spread across her face. "Keisha," Aaliyah said, her voice firm, "help me with my veil. I have a wedding to get to." Brenda let out a small, wounded sound, but Aaliyah didn't turn around. The balance of power had shifted, permanently and irrevocably. The consequences of Brenda's actions were just beginning. She had tried to stop a wedding, but instead, she had cemented a marriage and authored her own spectacular downfall. She had lost the one thing she craved above all else: control over her daughter. I watched Aaliyah as Keisha adjusted her veil. The fear and anxiety were gone from her posture, replaced by a radiant, unshakable confidence. She was no longer a daughter caught between loyalties. She was a woman, a partner, my equal. She caught my eye in the mirror, and the look we shared was a silent vow, more powerful than any words we would speak at the altar. We had faced the worst, and we had not just survived. We had won. The music was starting downstairs. It was time to get married. The walk down the aisle was surreal. Aaliyah was on the arm of her uncle Carol's husband, a kind, quiet black man named George, with a gentle smile, and skin the color of dark chocolate. He had stepped in without a word when it became clear Brenda was not in a state to participate. Brenda and Jamal were there, seated in the front row as instructed. They looked like statues, their faces pale and drawn. The smiles they wore were ghastly, stretched, and unnatural things, masks of civility that did nothing to hide the panic in their eyes. Every guest in that room could feel the tension, even if they didn't know the cause. Our vows were thick with unspoken meaning. When I promised to love, honor, and protect her, the words carried the weight of the battle we had just fought and won in the bridal suite. When she promised the same, her voice was clear and strong, a declaration of her independence and her choice. The reception was a masterclass in holding one's head high. Aaliyah was magnificent. She greeted guests, laughed, and danced with a lightness and joy that seemed to radiate from her very core. She was free. I stayed by her side, my hand rarely leaving the small of her back. People who had heard Brenda's subtle digs about me for months now watched us with a new curiosity. They could see the shift. They didn't know the details, but they knew power when they saw it. Dr. Evans and his wife, a graceful black woman named Lena with elegant, silver-streaked locks, arrived as promised. Marcus gave me a firm handshake and a knowing look. "I trust the patient is recovering well from her episode," he said, a slight twinkle in his eye. "She's making a full recovery," I replied with a small smile. Later in the evening, I found Brenda sitting alone at her table, staring into a glass of untouched champagne. Jamal was nowhere to be seen, likely nursing his shattered ego at the bar. I sat down opposite her. She wouldn't look at me. It was a beautiful ceremony, I said quietly. She flinched. Finally, she lifted her head, and her eyes were filled not with the arrogance I was used to, but with a raw, desperate fear. "What are you going to do?" she whispered. "What do you mean?" "To us. To me. To Jamal. You have all this power. You could ruin us." It was a confession, an admission of her own transactional worldview. She assumed I would operate as she would, using power to crush those who had wronged me. "Brenda," I said, and my voice was not unkind. "I have been in love with your daughter for 4 years. For 2 of those years, you have done everything in your power to make my life miserable. You insulted my character, my ambition, and my worth. You called me a charity case in front of your family. And today, you faked a medical crisis to sabotage our wedding. The only reason I am speaking to you now is because you are the mother of the woman I love." I leaned forward slightly. "So, no, I'm not going to ruin you. That's your move, not mine. I don't need to. You have already lost everything that matters to you. You've lost Aaliyah's trust. You've lost her respect. You've lost your power over her. From this day forward, your relationship with your daughter, and by extension with my family and your future grandchildren, will be on my terms. And my terms are very simple: respect, dignity, kindness. You will treat my wife with the love she deserves, and you will treat her husband with the respect he has earned. Is that clear?" She stared at me, speechless. Tears welled in her eyes. Real tears this time, not the crocodile tears of her earlier performance. They were the tears of defeat. She gave a small, jerky nod. "Good," I said, standing up. "Now, if you'll excuse me, I'm going to go dance with my wife." I left her there and walked back to the dance floor, where Aaliyah was waiting for me. I pulled her into my arms, and we swayed to the music, the rest of the world fading away. She rested her head on my shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered into my tuxedo jacket. "For what?" I asked. "For being patient, for waiting for me to see it myself, and for not letting her win." "She was never going to win," I said, holding her tighter. "She was never even in the same league." If this story reminded you that you should never judge someone by appearances, and that karma always finds a way, hit subscribe and leave a comment below. What would you have done in David's position? I read every comment. Now let's see how their story ends. 6 months later, Aaliyah and I were sitting on the balcony of our new home, a beautiful modern house overlooking the ocean that we'd designed together. The sun was setting, painting the sky in strokes of orange and purple. Aaliyah, my wife, leaned against me, a contented smile on her face. Her graphic design business was flourishing. With a small seed investment from me, she had launched her own branding agency and was already making a name for herself with high-profile clients. Her warm mahogany skin glowed in the golden light, and her natural curls were free, dancing in the gentle sea breeze. Our relationship with her family had found a new, fragile equilibrium. Brenda was trying. The change wasn't miraculous, but it was real. She was quiet, hesitant, and deferential in a way that was almost jarring. She called before visiting. She asked my opinion on things. She never ever mentioned money or status. The fear I had seen in her eyes at the wedding had been replaced by a grudging respect. She was learning a new way to exist in her daughter's life, one where she was not the central controlling force. It was a humbling process for her, but it was a necessary one. Jamal had been a harder case. His ego was so deeply wounded that he avoided us for months. He eventually came around after a long talk with Aaliyah, who laid out the same terms I had with their mother. He was still awkward and resentful around me, but the snide comments and condescending attitude were gone. He was like a dog that had finally learned who the alpha was. He couldn't comprehend my world, but he understood its power, and he knew better than to challenge it again. Aunt Carol and Uncle George had become our staunchest allies, thrilled at the shift in family dynamics. Carol had confessed to Aaliyah that she had watched Brenda's behavior for years, deeply troubled, but unsure how to intervene. Our wedding day, she said, was a moment of long overdue justice. Aaliyah sighed contentedly, snuggling closer. "You know," she said, her voice soft, "sometimes I feel bad for her." "For your mother?" I asked, surprised. "A little," she admitted. Her entire identity was built on that false sense of superiority, on judging people and keeping score. When you took that away, she didn't have much left. She's having to figure out who she is without all that. "She'll be better for it in the end," I said, kissing the top of her head. "And so will we." It was true. The confrontation, as painful as it had been a cleansing fire. It burned away the lies, the manipulation, and the fear, leaving behind something stronger and more honest. Our marriage wasn't just built on love. It was forged in a crucible and had come out unbreakable. Aaliyah had found her voice, and I had finally been able to share my whole self with her. There were no more secrets between us. My life hadn't changed much on the surface. I still ran my company, still pushed the boundaries of medical technology. But now I came home to a partnership, to a love that was real and unconditional. I had held back a part of myself for so long, afraid that wealth and success would taint the one thing I truly valued. But I had learned a vital lesson. True power wasn't in the billions in my bank account or the companies I owned. It was in the quiet dignity of knowing your own worth, even when others refused to see it. It was in the patience to wait for the right moment, and the wisdom to act with justice, not vengeance. Brenda had wanted to teach me my place. In the end, I had simply shown her the truth of mine, and in doing so, we had all finally been set free.